All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into an absolutely epic story. We're talking creation, betrayal, and a power struggle that literally forms the bedrock of Western civilization.
I mean, you've probably heard someone talk about the Midas touch, right?
Or how about this one? A Herculean task. We say it all the time to describe some impossible challenge.
But have you ever stopped to wonder where these incredible stories actually came from? Well, they all trace back to the Greek myths. And look, these aren't just dusty old fairy tales. These are foundational stories. The ancient Greeks used them to explain everything, from why the sun rises to the craziest parts of human nature. Okay, let's dive into this.
So to start, you have to imagine a time before time. Before there was light, before there were even gods, there was just one thing.
And that one thing was chaos. Now, what's really interesting is that chaos wasn't what we think of today, just a total mess. In the original Greek, it meant a void, a gap, a vast, dark, yawning chasm. It's from this absolute nothingness that everything, and I mean everything, is about to emerge.
So, out of this void, the very first divine beings just appear. You have Gaia, who is the earth itself, Tartarus, this super deep abyss, and then crucially, you get Eros. Now, Eros is the powerful force of love and attraction, and he is basically the cosmic engine that's going to pull everything else together. Super important.
Okay, so the stage is set. And now, Gaia, Mother Earth, she starts to create life all by herself. And this is where we get our first cosmic family.
First, Gaia gives birth to Uranus, the sky, and then, in a twist that's pretty common in these myths, he becomes her husband. So now we have our first divine couple, a literal union of earth and sky, and they're about to have some very, very powerful kids.
Together, they have three, let's call them sets, of really extraordinary children. You've got the 12 Titans, who are basically the first gods. Then you have the Cyclops, those one-eyed master craftsmen. And finally, the Hecatonchires, these terrifying giants with 100 hands each. But yeah, this was not a happy family.
See, Uranus was absolutely terrified of his own kids. He looked at their power and just hated them. And this quote really sums it up. He hated them from the get-go. As soon as each one was born, he would literally hide them away deep inside their own mother, Gaia, and just not let them see the light of day. This caused Gaia, the earth itself, just unimaginable pain. And she got angry, really angry. So, stuck in this constant agony and filled with rage, Gaia starts plotting. She decides she's going to get revenge against her husband. So she forges this incredible weapon and starts looking for a champion, one of her own children, to wield it. I mean, think about it. In a world ruled by the all-powerful sky, who would possibly dare to rise up against their own father? Well, most of the Titans were way too scared. All of them, except for one. And that one was Cronus. He was the youngest and by far the most ambitious of the Titans. He's the one who answers his mother's call. He absolutely shared her hatred for his father, and he was ready to do something about it.
So Gaia gives him the weapon, the adamantine sickle. It's basically this unbreakable, super sharp weapon made for one thing: vengeance. Armed with this thing, Cronus just lies in wait. And when Uranus, the sky, comes down to embrace Gaia, the earth, Kronos strikes. He ambushes his own father in an act so brutal it would literally change the cosmos forever.
So with that one single strike, Kronos castrated Uranus. And in doing so, he violently separated the sky from the earth for good. This single act of rebellion had these massive, profound consequences for the entire world.
And it's wild, because from this one incredibly violent act, two totally opposite forces are born. So, where Uranus's blood dripped onto the earth, you get the Furies and the Giants, beings of pure vengeance and strife. But, where his severed parts fell into the sea, the foam that churned up gave birth to Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Isn't that amazing? Vengeance and beauty born from the same violent moment.
So with Uranus now banished to the heavens, wounded and powerless, the universe had a brand new ruler.
And that new ruler was King Cronus. He became the lord of the Titans. He frees his brothers and sisters, he takes his sister Rhea as his queen, and a whole new era begins.
So there you have it, the first great generational shift. We started with chaos. Then you had the first era, the rule of the primordials, like Uranus. After the rebellion, Cronus rises. And now we're in Era 2, the age of the Titans, with King Cronus in charge.
But here's the thing. As Cronus took the throne, he got a chilling prophecy from his dying father.
It was a curse, really, and it was that he, Cronus, was destined to be overthrown by his own child. Sound familiar? The cycle of fear and rebellion, it wasn't over. It was just getting started.
So Cronus has seized power through this absolutely brutal betrayal. But the question is he just doomed to repeat history? That cycle of fear, son against father, has been set in motion. And that fear is going to lead to an even bigger, even more legendary conflict. And it will pave the way for the rise of the most famous gods of all, the Olympians.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to untangle the legend of maybe the most powerful, and for sure the most contradictory, god in the entire Greek pantheon, Zeus. Okay, so let's just dive right into the main puzzle here. You have this god who's supposed to be the ultimate symbol of divine order and justice. So why are most of his stories about his chaotic, frankly staggering love life? The answer, it turns out, gets to the very heart of what myths are all about. So to really get this contradiction, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning. Because Zeus's story, it doesn't start with him. It starts with his absolutely terrifying father. So meet Cronus. He's the Titan god of time. And his family policy, well, it was pretty grim. See, he was terrified of a prophecy that one of his own kids would overthrow him. His solution? He ate them. Every single one, as soon as they were born. I mean, what a powerful metaphor, right? Time gives birth to everything, and in the end, time consumes everything. But his wife, Rhea, she just couldn't take it anymore. So when her youngest son Zeus was born, she came up with this brilliant plan. She hid the baby, and instead she wrapped up a big stone in blankets and gave that to Cronus. And you know what? He swallowed it whole, didn't even check. And that exact stone, after Cronus eventually threw it back up, was placed at the sanctuary of Delphi. It became known as the Omphalos stone, which literally means the navel or the center of the world. Think about that. A physical monument to a trick played on a god. So Zeus gets raised in secret on the island of Crete. He grows up, becomes this incredibly powerful god, and he is ready to challenge his father, free his brothers and sisters, and kick off a war that would literally shake the entire cosmos. So what's his first move? He makes Cronus vomit up his siblings. And here's where it gets kind of weird. Because they were all reborn from Cronus after Zeus was born, Zeus, the baby of the family, technically becomes the eldest. It's a strange twist for sure. Now you can look at this war, the Titanomachy, in a couple of different ways. The simple version? It's just the kids overthrowing the parents, a new generation taking over. But a lot of people see it as something way more complex, almost like a hostile corporate takeover. It's a power struggle between Zeus and his cousins for who gets to run the family business, the entire cosmos. Zeus was smart, though. He knew he couldn't do this alone. He needed some serious backup. So he goes and frees these ancient beings that his own father had locked away deep in the earth. We're talking about the Cyclopes. Yep, the ones who forged his famous thunderbolts. And these 100-handed giants called the Hecatonchires. Talk about an army. So after this brutal, 10-year-long war, Zeus and the Olympians finally win. They did it. But, tearing down the old system, that's the easy part. The real work was just beginning. Now they had to actually build something new to take its place. Okay, so the three brothers who led the charge, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, they sit down and basically draw straws to divide up the world. Poseidon gets the seas, Hades gets the underworld, and Zeus, of course, gets the sky. And with that, he sets himself up as the king of this whole new divine order. But here's the thing, not everyone was thrilled with this new management. His own grandmother, Gaia, we're talking the primordial earth goddess herself. She felt like the old ways were being trampled on. So she gives birth to this monster, a horrifying creature of pure chaos named Typhon, created for one reason and one reason only, to destroy Zeus and his new sky god regime. And look, this wasn't just another fight. This was it, the final boss battle. Everything was on the line, the fate of the entire universe. This was the ultimate test of whether Zeus really had the right to rule. And you know what? Zeus almost lost. He got completely wrecked in their first fight. Typhon actually ripped out his sinews, his tendons, and just left him powerless in a cave. It was only because the messenger god, Hermes, pulled off a rescue mission that Zeus got his strength back for a rematch. So in the end, Zeus wins. He is finally triumphant. And he traps Typhon under Mount Etna in Sicily. For hundreds of years, the ancient Greeks would point to that volcano and say, "See that? That's Typhon's rage, still boiling under the earth." It's a perfect example of how they used myths to explain the world around them. Okay, so his throne is secure. All challengers have been defeated. He's the undisputed king of the cosmos. What does he do with all that power? Well, this brings us right back to where we started, to that big question. He starts having just an incredible number of affairs. And to pull this off, he becomes the master of disguise, the ultimate shapeshifter. He turns into a bull for Europa, a swan for Leda. He even visits one woman as a shower of gold. I mean, his creativity was really only matched by his infidelity. And at first, you just think, wow, this is basically a divine soap opera. Just a bunch of scandalous stories. But what if there was something else going on? What if these myths were actually serving a really important purpose for the ancient Greeks? Okay, here's the key. Almost every one of these affairs produced a child, and that child was usually a hero or a demigod who went on to found a specific city or a tribe. You're talking Heracles, Perseus, Minos, the list is huge. These stories were a way to connect all these different local towns and communities directly to the main man on Olympus. And that right there, that's the real genius of it. This was essentially mythological nation building. Zeus's messy, chaotic love life wasn't just personal, it was a sophisticated political project. It was how you took all these separate, often warring Greek city-states and wove them all together into one single culture, all under one big divine family tree. And once you see that, it completely reframes how you look at Zeus. But it's bigger than that. It reframes how you look at mythology itself, what it is, and what it actually does for a culture. When you look at the whole story of Zeus, from his fight for the throne to his, let's call them, strategic alliances, it's really a masterclass in how myths work. They aren't just bedtime stories. They're the social and political glue for an entire civilization. They explain the natural world, they justify who's in charge, and they create that shared sense of who we are. And really, that's the big takeaway here. Zeus might be a figure from thousands of years ago, but the function of his story, that's timeless. Which, of course, makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the big stories we tell ourselves today to explain our world and to justify who holds the power? When you think of the Greek gods, forget those perfect, serene marble statues. The real gods of Olympus, they were a mess. A powerful, dysfunctional, and shockingly human family. Seriously, their divine drama could give any reality TV show a run for its money. And right at the center of all that drama, you've got one of the most powerful and complex figures in all of mythology. So why was Hera, the queen of the gods, always so incredibly angry? If we unpack her famous rage, it tells us a ton about the ancient world and the kinds of gods they believed in. You know, it's easy to just see Hera as this purely vengeful character. But for ancient writers, it was a little more complicated. Think about it. For mortal Greek women who had very little power in their day-to-day lives, watching Hera unleash her divine fury was, well, it was entertainment. She was the star of this huge cosmic drama, acting out all the frustrations they couldn't. Her anger was almost a release for them, a vicarious satisfaction. So, how exactly did all this divine drama play out? Well, the arguments on Mount Olympus pretty much never stayed there. They had a habit of spilling down into the mortal world, and they ended up creating everything from monsters to the constellations in the sky and even our seasons. Okay, to really get Hera, you have to understand this one huge central irony. Her entire divine purpose, her whole reason for being, was to be the protector of marriage and family. And yet her own husband, Zeus, the king of all gods, well, he was constantly unfaithful. This wasn't just a personal insult, it was a direct attack on her very identity, and it's the engine that drives so many of these incredible myths. Now, Hera herself was always faithful, but being the queen of the gods, she definitely attracted some unwanted attention, which leads to a really, really dangerous question. What happens when a mere mortal gets a crush on the queen? Well, one guy, a king named Ixion, was about to find out the hard way. Get ready, because this is probably one of the weirdest origin stories in all of mythology. So the mortal king Ixion starts lusting after Hera. Zeus finds out, and he doesn't just get mad, he gets creative. He literally shapes a cloud to look exactly like Hera and sends it down to Ixion. The king is totally fooled, and from this bizarre union between a man and a cloud, a whole new race is born, the Centauros, or centaurs, half man, half horse. And the Greeks love to hide clues right in the language itself. The name Centauros is thought to come from the Greek words kenteo, to pierce, and ara, air, or cloud. He was, quite literally, the one who pierced the cloud, a name that's a permanent reminder of his very strange beginning. But maybe there's a more down-to-earth explanation here. For the ancient Greeks, who mostly fought on foot, imagine seeing horse-mounted warriors from the north for the first time, like the Scythians. They would have looked terrifying, almost inhuman, a man and a horse moving together as one powerful, deadly creature. The myth of the centaur might have just been their way of making sense of this very real and very scary new enemy. So these family feuds didn't just create monsters on Earth. Their impact was way bigger. The gods' personal dramas were literally written into the fabric of the cosmos. Ever wonder where the Milky Way came from? According to the Greeks, it started with Zeus. He had a mortal son, the famous Heracles, and he desperately wanted him to be immortal. The solution? The baby needed to drink divine milk from Hera. So what does he do? He sneaks the infant up to Hera while she's sleeping. But Heracles, already super strong, bites down so hard that Hera wakes up in pain and violently shoves him away. In that moment, her divine milk sprays across the night sky, creating that celestial streak we now call the Milky Way. But the cosmos wasn't just shaped by anger and trickery. It was also shaped by profound sadness. The ancient Greeks believed that the cycle of our seasons was born from the grief of one mother, the grain goddess Demeter, after her daughter Persephone was taken to the underworld. The story is such a powerful way to explain the natural world. When her daughter Persephone is with her, up in the world above, Demeter is happy. She lets the earth flourish, and everything is fertile and full of life. That's our spring and summer. But when Persephone has to return to the underworld to be with her husband Hades, Demeter grieves. Her sorrow makes the earth go barren and cold, and that gives us fall and winter. A mother's love and loss, just cycling through the year forever. All of this brings us to a really crucial theme in Greek thought: the very thin, very dangerous line between gods and mortals. The gods were obviously powerful, but they were also incredibly vain and got offended really easily. And for a human to forget their place, that was just asking for disaster. The Greeks had a special word for this, the ultimate sin, hubris. And it's so much more than just pride. It's a kind of dangerous, delusional overconfidence. It's when you, a mere mortal, start to think you're as good as, or maybe even better than, the gods. And in Greek mythology, hubris never, ever goes unpunished. I mean, the myths are just filled with these cautionary tales. There's Arachne, a weaver who bragged she was better than the goddess Athena herself, so she got turned into a spider, doomed to weave forever. There's Niobe, who boasted that her 14 children made her better than a goddess who only had 2. Well, those 2 gods, Apollo and Artemis, came down and killed every single one of Niobe's children. And Ixion, for wanting Hera, he was sentenced to eternity on a spinning wheel of fire. The message from the gods was brutally simple: know your place. And yet, out of all this chaos,
The affairs, the jealousy, the horrible punishments, something totally new and remarkable started to happen. Because the gods were constantly meddling in mortal lives, they ended up creating a new generation of demigods. This was the dawn of the Age of Heroes. The prototype, the original blueprint for this new age, was Perseus. And of course, his father was Zeus himself. That connection gave him incredible power, but it also put a giant target on his back. I mean, his life story is basically the blueprint for every hero's journey you've ever heard of. It starts with a miraculous birth, he gets sent on an impossible quest to kill Medusa, he succeeds thanks to some help from the gods, and he even rescues a princess on his way home. But, and this is so important, even this great hero couldn't escape his destiny. An oracle had predicted he would kill his grandfather, and years later, after trying to avoid it, that's exactly what happens, by complete accident. And that really shows you one of the core beliefs of the Greek worldview. It didn't matter if you were the son of Zeus. You could not overcome your fate. Destiny to them was a force that was even more powerful than the gods and heroes combined. Their divine blood made their lives epic, for sure, but their endings were just as set in stone as anyone else's.
So that leaves us with this final thought. In these ancient stories, we see gods with all too human flaws, and heroes who, despite all their strength, are ultimately slaves to fate. What does that say about how the Greeks saw their world? And maybe, just maybe, what does it reveal about how we still try to make sense of the power, the chaos, and the role of destiny in our own lives today?
You ever wonder why we still talk about some guy who turned everything to gold? Or a kid who flew a little too close to the sun? Well, these aren't just old kids' stories. Turns out they're more like ancient mirrors, reflecting our own lives back at us. It's kind of like a psychological shorthand we've all inherited. And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Why do these warnings, thousands of years old, still hit so close to home? What is it about these Greek myths that makes them such perfect and, let's be honest, timeless mirrors for who we are? I mean, think about it. These phrases are absolutely everywhere. We use them to talk about our bosses, our friends, our own ambitions, and our screw-ups. They're so baked into our language, you might not even remember the wild and often pretty tragic stories they actually come from. So let's unpack a few.
Let's start with a big one, maybe the most fundamental human driver of all, desire. The Greeks were absolute masters at showing how the things we want most, money, love, admiration, can get twisted and become curses if we're not careful.
Yeah, we say someone's got the Midas touch, and we mean it as a huge compliment, right? Like they're just effortlessly successful. But the original story? Oh, it is not a fairy tale. For the actual King Midas, that gift was a straight-up nightmare, a horrifying lesson in what greed really costs.
So he wishes for infinite wealth, and the god Dionysus is like, you got it. At first, it's incredible, but that thrill wears off real fast when his food turns to gold in his mouth, when his wine turns to metal. He can't eat, he can't drink. And then comes the ultimate gut punch. He goes to hug his daughter, the person he loves most, and in an instant, she's just a cold, lifeless golden statue. His wish for endless wealth literally cost him everything that makes life worth living.
But it's not just greed for gold that can eat you alive. The hunger for admiration, for love, that can be just as destructive. Which brings us to a word we use constantly, a word pulled straight from a Greek myth, narcissism. The story goes that Narcissus was this ridiculously handsome guy who was cruel to everyone who fell for him. So, as punishment, the gods made him fall in love with his own reflection in a pond. And he was just captivated, completely obsessed. He couldn't eat, couldn't drink, he just stayed there, staring at himself until he literally wasted away. It's a pretty brutal warning, isn't it? That a life lived just for your own reflection is no life at all.
So Narcissus' obsession was pointed inward, at himself. But what happens when that kind of obsessive love is pointed outward at something you've created? Well, that's the story of Pygmalion. He was a sculptor who was so fed up with real women that he decided to just carve his perfect woman out of ivory. And then he fell hopelessly in love with it.
So you see, we've got two sides of the same obsessive coin here. Narcissus found his perfect love in his own reflection. It was a love that came completely from inside himself. Pygmalion, on the other hand, created his perfect love. He built an ideal and then fell for it. Both stories are digging at the exact same danger, falling in love with a perfect image instead of a real, messy, imperfect person.
Okay, so from the trap of desire, let's switch gears to another super powerful human drive, ambition. The Greeks had a specific word for the kind of pride that goes too far, that dangerous arrogance that makes us think we're invincible. They called it hubris.
And there is no better story about hubris than Icarus. His dad, Daedalus, was this genius inventor who made them wings out of feathers and wax to escape a prison. But before they took off, he gave his son this one crystal-clear warning. A plea, really. Stay in the middle.
But Icarus, he gets up there, he feels the wind under his wings, and he's just totally overwhelmed by the sheer joy of it all. The power. He forgets everything his father said. He just gets higher and higher, reaching for the sun, completely intoxicated by his own ambition. Until the wax melts, the wings fall apart, and he plunges into the sea. It's the ultimate story of what happens when ambition isn't balanced with a little wisdom.
So Icarus's ambition was his own undoing. But what happens when that ambition is tied to almost unlimited power? Well, that brings us to one of the most complex, most tragic heroes in all of mythology, Heracles.
Now, Heracles was a demigod. He had strength you can't even imagine. But, and this is a huge but, in a fit of madness sent by a jealous goddess, he did the unthinkable. He killed his wife and children. To pay for this horrible act, he was sentenced to perform 12 basically impossible tasks, his famous labors. They weren't just tests of strength, they were a journey to try and master the very power that had ruined his life. First up, kill a lion with skin so tough, no weapon could pierce it. So what does Heracles do? He just wrestles it, strangles it with his bare hands. It's all about pure, overwhelming force. But then he faces the Hydra, a monster where if you chop off one head, 2 more grow back. You can't just punch your way out of that problem, right? He had to get smart. He figured out he had to burn the necks as he cut them to stop the regrowth. This showed he had brains to go with all that brawn. And then you get a task on a totally different scale. Clean stables that hadn't been touched in 30 years. Instead of grabbing a shovel, Heracles just reroutes 2 entire rivers to flush the whole place out. I mean, who does that? That's not just strength. That's godlike power. The power to literally change the world around you.
And here's the profound, tragic irony of Heracles. His greatest gift, his incredible power, was also the source of his deepest pain. The same strength that made him a hero was the same unchecked force that made him kill his own family. So his entire life becomes this epic struggle to control the destructive monster inside himself.
So you see, these stories are so much more than just adventures. They're deep, profound explorations of who we are. They hold up that mirror to the same flaws and the same virtues that we've been wrestling with for thousands of years.
It's really a fantastic guide to our own failings, isn't it? Midas teaches us that greed will cost you everything that actually matters. Narcissus shows us that if you only love yourself, you'll end up totally alone. Icarus is the classic reminder that ambition without limits is a death sentence. And Heracles, maybe the most important of all, shows that incredible strength without wisdom to guide it is just chaos. They all tell us that our greatest strengths can become our greatest weaknesses if we're not paying attention.
Look, these stories have stuck around for a simple reason. The human flaws they describe are still with us. They give us a perfect language for talking about greed and vanity and hubris. So I'll just leave you with this question. When you look at the world today, which one of these ancient warnings do you think we need to hear the most?